Welcome to the Dr. and Mrs. Curry podcast, where the emphasis is on parenting related matters. I am Dr. Joshua John Curry, and with me is my better half, Mrs. Cartrisa Lynn Curry. Today's episode will concentrate on being present and active as a parent. We will focus on becoming and remaining involved wholeheartedly from an all inclusive manner. We're going to jump right in with the topic of geographical implications. And here's where I'm going with that one. I want to give us a hypothetical scenario in which someone was dating in high school, we're high school sweethearts, we transition into adulthood, ultimately become a parent by creating a life, and here we are, but we have geographical issues that come into place. And here's where I'm going. I want us to take a male and female. They've been dating since their freshman year of high school, all the way through their senior year, all the way through graduation. And of course, with that level of puppy love, there's been discussions throughout their years of dating of eventually starting a life together, intertwining their lives together, and building a family together. Now, here, under those particular circumstances, situations take place, life happens, and those circumstances, those antecedents, those events could alter dreams. And I'm going to present this scenario. I'm going to bring it all back into parenting, and we're going to discuss those geographical issues. So here's where I'm going with that. Upon graduating high school, the male decides to look into each of the five branches of the armed forces. We have the Army, the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Air Force. So the male figures that, particularly with him and his better half looking into building a life together, he figures that upon graduating high school, he can at least look into starting or building the roots or establishing the foundation of a career for himself in which he could be in a position to more sufficiently support his family. He also worked with a recruiter, and he came to the realization that in addition to starting this career, getting those marketability skills, getting those experiences, he can also go to college and not have to worry about the accumulation of any debt or have to be concerned with financing his education beyond high school. So, of course, he speaks with his better half, and they both decide that this could be a good idea for them. So, at least initially, they decide that he'll go away, he'll commit to active duty. In this case, we're going to say the United States Army. He had an opportunity to work as a military police officer immediately following high school. So he has that law enforcement experience, and this is something that he fathomed, that he dreamt about throughout his life. He also figured that in addition to working as a military police officer, he can study criminal justice in undergraduate school. So that can give him that leg up, so to speak, as far as professionally and educationally for when he separates from active duty with the United States Army and transition into the civilian world. This could put him in a position to have those career opportunities that perhaps wouldn't be available for someone who doesn't have that level of experience or that level of college education. So he goes from, since you and I were both working and living in southwestern Pennsylvania, in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, we're going to say that he leaves Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and his first duty station is going to be in the Seattle, Washington area. So with him being across the country, so now we have already established those geographical considerations there. His better half, she remains in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. She attends the University of Pittsburgh. She remains living with her biological mother and her biological father. So those concerns are taken away as far as her supporting herself. Coming from a great family, they decided that they just want her to focus on her studies, get the highest grade point average possible, and ultimately transition into graduate school and postgraduate school and things of that nature. Her better half, her male counterpart, her boyfriend, periodically when the time permits, when he's allowed to do so, he's traveling back and forth from the Seattle, Washington area to the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. And of course, they're still maintaining that long distance relationship. So things are going great there. But of course, life happens. One of those visits, of course, with him visiting his significant other, of course, things happen. They're adults, and now that dream that they've discussed as far as creating a family did not happen when she reaches out to him and notifies him that she is pregnant. So everything's fine there. He is now 3 years into his career. Now, at that point in his career, he's been doing well professionally. He's been promoted into a managerial position. He's also on the verge of completing undergraduate school and getting that undergraduate degree in criminal justice. All of these wonderful things are happening with him personally and professionally. The same thing is happening with his girlfriend who's living here in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. She's also doing well in undergraduate school, and she's also on the verge of being within a year of completing her undergraduate degree. But here's where those geographical considerations take place. The United States Army, I can speak from that from my experiences serving a little more than 14 years with the United States Army. I can speak from that in a sense that you are in a position to be successful if that's what you want to be. There are various blueprints that are available, various paths you can take to be successful. So with him being around that particular lifestyle, he came to the realization that perhaps 4 years shouldn't be sufficient. Perhaps he should look into signing another contract, but especially with him being on the verge of transitioning into a leadership slash managerial position. He's offered to go away from the Seattle, Washington area to attend developmental and advanced leadership courses to get those particular experiences. And he sits with his girlfriend and he realizes that perhaps he should at least sign another contract for another 3 or 4 years. So as we just mentioned, they're also expecting their first child together. The child comes, he graduates college, he obtains his undergraduate degree in criminal justice. He transitions into graduate school, and of course, why not? With the United States Army having tuition assistance in place and other avenues in place to finance a graduate level education. And with him transitioning into that leadership position as a military police officer, he essentially doesn't really have any reasoning to walk away from the career that he's already established for himself through the United States Army. He is still doing the best that he can to travel back and forth across the country to see his girlfriend and now to see his newborn daughter. She's doing well. She's also completed undergraduate school. She transitioned into graduate school upon completing undergraduate school. She is still receiving sufficient support from her biological mother and biological father and other loved ones now, with them having that newborn baby girl that they've welcomed into their lives. But what happened here is, even though they've had that history and they've discussed these matters throughout their years of dating together, they're not building their lives together. He has a life in Seattle, Washington. She has a life in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that she's building for herself as well. They're trying to maintain that love. They're doing the best they can to be the best parents for their daughter that he just welcomed into the world. But they're coming to the realization now that they're transitioning into early adulthood, their lives are not intertwining with each other. And then they realize that they will always love each other unconditionally. But as far as romantically, that's starting to fizzle. And they're both coming to the realization that this is starting to fizzle. And as far as any romantic encounters, this perhaps is not going to be in their immediate or distant future. But now we have this child here. The gentleman who's away, they're having these discussions, they're having these feelings. He meets someone else and he's trying to fight it. He has a young family back in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, but he's also realized that he just signed another contract, which of course him and his girlfriend, they were in agreement with that. He just signed another contract and now he's going to go from Seattle, Washington to now he signed up for an overseas assignment. So now he's going to be stationed in Germany. So now we have even more significant geographical implications and considerations as far as him being involved as a parent, because we all know that it takes more than teleconferencing and things of that nature to raise a child, to be actively involved in your child's life. But also with him having this life with the United States Army, he's meeting other people. His girlfriend, she's meeting other people, and with them embracing the realization that there's nothing, that their romantic lives is diminishing. Now they're starting to at least consider and dive into dating others. And I want to transition into that here a little later. So now we're talking about those geographical boundaries, those geographical implications. So under those circumstances, the gentleman who's away now he's stationed in Germany and he has a child in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. He has all intentions on being the best father that he can be, despite his life and his girlfriend's life. I guess now we're talking about them becoming former significant others. Their lives are not intertwining in a sense because of these geographical implications, and also just with that childhood romance just not transitioning well, or at least what they plan as far as going into adulthood. They're coming to the realization now that they will always love each other. Like I mentioned, they will always be friends. They will always be supportive and encouraging of each other. But as far as that life that they imagine and envision for themselves, as far as being that mother, being that father, raising that family under one roof, they're coming to the realization that this is not going to happen for them. And with him being stationed in Germany, and I'm just using this as an example, with him being stationed in Germany, we can only imagine the logistical challenges that it could take for him to just travel back and forth, taking those international trips, as far as time, as far as finances, and things of that nature. He has obligations that he has to tend to, with him being in a leadership and managerial position as a military police officer. He has graduate school, and he has other things taking place in his life that's just essentially taking away that time. And it's not going to be very easy to just hop on a plane on a consistent basis to through travel internationally to come see his daughter. So under those particular circumstances or similar circumstances in which we just have geographical issues with one parent living here in this particular state, one parent living there in that state, and we have the child with this parent or that parent. But essentially, what I wanted to present, we have those geographical issues that are realistic, that do happen. And I've worked with countless people throughout my career. I've met countless people personally. They want to be the best parent that they can be, but we have these geographical issues that are staying in the way. From your perspective and what you've been studying and what you've experienced personally, what recommendations would you offer someone in which we have these geographical issues, but we want to be the best parent that we can be?
For me, I think I've told you this before. I've got one of my old army friends. We follow each other on Facebook and we still talk occasionally. He actually is in and was in a similar situation. He was stationed in Japan for a year and a half, and both his kids were stateside and they live in different states, but he made it work. And he always said one of the ways how is Facebook, like FaceTime, Zoom meetings, like different teleconferencing, things like that, but also the daily phone calls. You should still, even though you're in different locations, you can still call and talk to your kid every day. So the daily phone calls, and they would set time aside that they would make that trip. Either he would make it to the kids or the kids would make it to him. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be the adult traveling. Sometimes it's good for the kid to travel too, because then they get to see a different place and a new experience. So when they get to go back to their friends, going back with this exciting story about where their dad lives or their mom, either which way, and getting to experience where they live at and what they see. So they get to see something new, a new culture, new area, and they still get that time with their parent. Like that time and that exploring time that they spend together in that new area builds a strong relationship. And those everyday phone calls build a strong relationship, because just because you're not there physically, you can still be there by calling every day and asking them how their day went. And don't let them just tell you fine. Have them go through their day with you. And then you guys sit there and talk about their day, talk about your day, and just have that same conversation you would have if you were there in person, but just on the phone.
I like that. I like those recommendations and the associate that you mentioned. I do I do applaud those particular efforts because it could be, you can be easily distracted as far as missing one day. and then one day turns into 2 days, and then it turns into a week, and then before you know it, we've gone 2 weeks, 1 month without any form of communication. And I feel as though with that particular rippling effect, if we allow it to happen as a family, from a family dynamic, if we allow that to happen, that has tremendous bearing on this is how parents can go 1 month, 3 months,
Yeah.
6 months without any form of communication with their children whatsoever. I like to at least make the assumption that underlying any significant circumstances, and we're talking about incarceration, inpatient rehabilitation, and things of that nature, or some sort of emergency circumstances, that no parent, regardless of the dynamics between his or her former significant other or the other parent of the child, no parent wants to go 1 month, 3 months, 6 months without any interaction with their
Yeah.
children. I at least want to make that assumption. It's just that things happen, circumstances take place. Like I mentioned with the example that you gave about your associate, that if we're not making that sufficient effort, that's how one day could turn into a week, so on and so forth. So I like the recommendation that you offered, that it's not just the responsibility of one particular person, but let's put a little piece of that particular pie, so to speak, in the hands of everyone, so we can all at least have a collective effort. We can make that collective effort and move forward with making certain that we're remaining we're remaining active as parents in the lives of our children.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, the example that I gave earlier, I talked about I talked about the service member, and I talked about his former significant other living in different areas geographically. And they came to the realization that there's nothing left there, at least romantically. But of course, we're always going to be supportive of each other, always going to be encouraging of each other, and doing what we can to make certain that the other person is having, at least having things less challenging as possible in their lives. I talked about with that romantic fizzle dwindling, now we're transitioning into dating others. So now we're talking about potentially having step parents, and that was the next subtopic that I wanted to dive into. I've witnessed throughout my life, and I witnessed throughout my professional career, that when there are other adults, when we move on to dating others, and when we're having step parents potentially introduced into the lives of a child or children, that could, rather than that being something looked at as far as having, okay, now we have more love, now we have more support in the life or lives of our child or children, step parents could potentially be viewed upon as an adversary rather than as an advocate. They could be viewed as someone, or an obstacle, or potentially unintentionally an excuse. We could look at a step parent and say, okay, my child or children have this woman, have this man in their lives now. They're living together. This step parent is involved with all the academic challenges, all the parent teacher conferences, all of the recreational activities, all the karate practices, all the piano recitals, all of the basketball games, all of the soccer games, all of the football games, and things of that nature. They could essentially be a little intimidating. I was raised by a stepfather. He did a wonderful job. He was never a physical specimen in a sense of physical fitness being something that was dominant in his life. And here's where I'm going with that. Growing up in inner city West Philadelphia, football and basketball were pretty much very instrumental during my childhood. And with him, there was about a 2 year period, my memory serves me correctly, in which he did work two full-time jobs. So without any access to an automobile, he had to use public transportation to travel to and from each of these full-time jobs, in addition to the time it took to travel home. So with him working 16 hours, coupled with using public transportation, I would literally wait for him at 13, 14 years old. I would wait for him, and I would say to him that I wanted to play a game of football, to play a game of basketball. And these games could literally last more than an hour. And I'm not sure if he ever said no. I have no memories of him ever saying no. And I spoke with him about that one time as I became an adult, and I transitioned into becoming a parent myself. And I asked him, I said, I know you were not a physical freak of nature. How did you have the physical strength, even if mental strength was needed? How did you even just have the physical strength to never say no to me anytime I had a request as far as engaging in any form of physical activity? And he had shared with me, he said, well, obviously, I was very exhausted, but he said, I felt as though that unfortunately things happen with your biological father not being able to be around as much as you wanted to. And I know he would share with me that I know you rarely spoke of it, but of course, I know that you wanted your biological father around. He said, I felt as though I was obligated, if I was physically able to do it, if I was able to do whatever you asked for, whatever you requested, that I was obligated to say yes. And he would share with me that he was concerned that if I waited for him to get home, to go to the park, to play a game of basketball by two to the score of 100, he told me that he was always concerned that if he ever told me no, I would use that time and I would go and do something that could get me in trouble. So he told me that, of course, in addition to the unconditional love, that he felt obligated to make certain that my time was occupied in a constructive way. Because if not, he was very concerned that I would go out there and do something that could get me in trouble. And when he said that, at the at the age of 13 years old, at the age of 14 years old, of course, my mind wasn't there. I was just waiting for him to come home to play basketball and to play football. And like I mentioned, I had no memory of him ever saying no. He did a more than excellent job as a stepfather. I have a lot of lessons that I learned from him. There were times, of course, because he was a authoritative figure. He was a parent essentially. There were times where things didn't go my way, and he would share with me. He would say, "I know you're upset. I know you're sad. I know you're angry. You're angry with me right now." But he said, "I promise you, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, perhaps not even next year. But when you're an adult and you're going through these particular situations, you will understand why I had to pull the plug, so to speak, on this particular engagement, on that request, with that activity." And anytime that happened, I will always, when I'm back in that situation and I'm in something similar, I would say to myself, "Oh, that's what he was talking about. That's what he meant." So those lessons learned from being active as a parent are very prominent in my life, even to this day, with me approaching my 38th birthday and being the very proud father of two wonderful children. Those lessons learned from him being the active and present step parent had tremendous bearing on me during that point in my life. And also, like I mentioned, at this point, not only in adulthood, but also in parentinghood. So going back to having an active, present step parent or having that stepfather in my life, what can we recommend to those biological parents who are watching from afar or perhaps somewhat intimidated by that active present step parent? What can we offer them if they're listening into this and they're involved with our particular platform that we're trying to put out there to ultimately put parents in a position to be the best versions of themselves? What can we offer that parent who perhaps is a little bit, I want to use the word, intimidated by that present step parent that's around their children on a consistent basis?
I think the main thing is self-reflection, because as an adult, you have to take yourself not 100% out of the equation, but when it comes to the well-being of your kid, you need to take yourself and what you want and put it to the side and think to yourself, what's best for your child? Is it best for your child to have 3 or 4 people that love them unconditionally and that take the time to do what they need or go where they want them to go, and is in the crowd cheering them on so loud that no one else can hear or see what's going on? Or is it better for your child to only have you? It's always better for a child to have a cheer squad. And that's the way I look at it. Look at it as you just added an additional member to your child's cheer squad. You just added an additional person that loves them unconditionally, that is going to be there and help them in any way that they can. So you just gave, by accepting this person into your child's life and being there, and you don't even, it's good if you make friends with a step parent, because then you guys are a cohesive group and there's no division, which is best for the child, because then there's unity all the way around. And it's also best for you as parents, because then your child can't play the step parent against the parent. You want that cohesiveness so that your child gets the best of everything. And it's always best, the more love that a kid gets, the better off for that child, because that step parent may have an experience that you may not necessarily have had that can help your child down the road. And it may help you down the road too, if you guys, like I said, if you become friends. You don't have to be best buds and go out every week for a beer or something, but you just want to be able to co-parent together. Co-parenting works not only for parents that are no longer together, but also for their new significant others that are together. So in general, just look at it as you're building a cheer squad for your child. You're building a team and a family for them that no matter what is always going to be there to support them. Put the child first. And when you do that, I think everything else will fall into place the way it should.
That level of collaboration, that's something that I've oftentimes used during it. In this case, I want to talk about family counseling sessions. I've worked with an array of people throughout my career, and even, of course, currently, there are multiple adults involved in the life or lives of their children, of their child or children. And there's been weeks, months, and even years in which these multiple adults have been involved in the life or lives of these particular children, or in some cases just a child if there is one child there. The point where I'm going here is I'll always bring up periodically. I will bring up, have the biological parent and have the person that you're currently dating, have they even had a conversation yet? Have they met yet? The answer is always no. And that's very concerning because we're not talking about, this isn't just someone that we're talking about in the case of, you haven't just started dating 2 weeks ago, 1 month ago. This is someone you've dated for 3 years now. As a parent myself, I'll always tell people that if for some reason things did not work out between you and I would at least want to do the best that I can to let you know that I am supportive of what's taking place. But perhaps most importantly, I want to make certain that the person that you've introduced into the lives of our two children, I want to make certain that we're at least on the same page, that I know who that person is, I know what they're about, and vice versa. It's always very concerning when someone shares with me, when they disclose that we're now approaching 3 years of me dating this person, and that person still has not even had any form of verbal communication with the other biological parent of my child or children. I've tried multiple things. I've shared with people that, like you mentioned, that as far as becoming best friends, perhaps that isn't something that's going to happen. But we as adults, we as mature, responsible, professional adults, we can still be cordial. And as far as whatever happens, as far as the relationship between the biological parent and the step parent, could we become best friends? Perhaps, or maybe not. Is that important? No. But like you mentioned, as far as having that center of influence, having that cheer section for the child, is that something that we as the adults in the lives of the children, is that something that we should at least consider? And if we could utilize the self-reflection that you mentioned, could we at least utilize that to say, okay, you know what, this weekend we have this gathering that's already scheduled. I can show up, the other party can show up. We can at least meet with each other and have that at least introductory meeting with each other. Doesn't have to last a very long time. And I've shared that. And I've had people say, okay, I will at least consider it. And then during our next time together, whether that be during an individual counseling session, a group counseling session, or a family counseling session, I would, of course, dive right into that. Did it happen? How did things go? And the excuses were there. The justification was there that one party didn't show up. So this will happen over the course. And I understand things could take place. But now we're talking about 3, 4, 5, without exaggerating, now we're talking about 10 gatherings that took place. And we couldn't figure out how to meet with each other. But we still have this level of apprehensiveness. We still have this disdain for a person that we haven't even met, that we haven't even had any form of conversation with, we have not communicated with. What do you feel as though that we can offer those adults who are leaning upon, I don't want to use the term excuse, but they're they're finding rationalizations to prolong this meeting with this other party who is actively involved in the lives of their children. What can we offer them to say, you know what, no more justifications, no more rationalizations, and there should I say it, no more excuses. We're going to meet this Saturday, 3:00 p.m. at this location. Of course, barring any emergencies, we will meet this Saturday, 3:00, this location. No matter what, we're going to meet with each other. What can we offer people who've been leaning upon those excuses over the course of not only months, but years?
For me, I honestly, I think like the best thing to do is if you can set time aside to do something that is, dare say it, like frivolous and not necessary, then you can set time aside to do something that is instrumental in your child's life. So if you have plans, say you have plans with a group of coworkers or something, why not just have that person come and tag along to that situation? If you're uncomfortable meeting someone by yourself, say that, and then just make arrangements for you guys to meet up within a group setting. Like if you want to have one of your friends there and they want to have one of their friends there, okay, fine. But as adults, you guys honestly should be able to meet up separately. If you don't want to meet up with, if let's say for instance, this is a dad meeting up with a potential stepdad, if you don't want the mother around, then just tell her, hey, I would like to speak to him on the phone, and you guys make arrangements between the two of you. Don't, if it's coming to a point to where you guys need to have that conversation, you need to sit down and you need to know each other, because one person is making assumptions about the other person, and that is being detrimental to the child because they're probably being put in the middle of situations that they have no place and no reason to be put in the middle of. So in layman's terms, pull up your big boy and big girl pants and go and have a conversation with somebody. Go and have it at a restaurant if you think that it could be potential to go left or go the wrong direction. Go have it at a restaurant, because then you're in a group, you're in a public setting, and everyone behaves when they're in public settings. Or if you want to have it, you take the kids to the park and you guys sit down and have the conversation at the park. You can watch them run around and play, and you guys can talk, and then you guys can also see how each other interacts with the child or children, and you guys can talk about that in the situation as well. As long as you make the situation about the child and the children and not about your personal feelings, there should not be an issue as to why you have not met each other and you guys have both been a part of the child or children's lives for a long period of time. So maybe take the middleman out of it and just do it, the two of you.
You make it mentioning of how children could, I want to use the term unintentionally, how children could be essentially placed in the middle. This is something that I've dealt with professionally unfortunately on many occasions. We're talking about a biological father,
Right.
and in this case, the woman isn't married to her current significant other, but they've been dating for approximately 3 years. There was an incident that took place, of course, with any relationship. We're going to have some days that are not too perfect. There was a minor incident, according to the parties that disclosed the information to me. There was a minor incident that took place. The children, unfortunately, they were present and they had their interpretation of what happened.
Mhm.
The children ended up telling the biological father their side of the story. And of course, the biological father, he's very concerned about what he heard the children, what he heard multiple children beneath the age of 5 years old share about what they believe happened as far as their mother and her current significant other. She had shared with me that it wasn't, things weren't a big deal. They just perhaps got a little bit louder than they should have as far as the disagreement that took place.
Right.
The children were under the impression that not only was their biological mother in danger, but they were in danger, and that's what they had shared with their biological father once they returned to his home for him to have they have split custody between them. And this was great between. This is something I've always applauded as far as them. They were in a position to communicate this between themselves. They didn't have to get family courts, and they didn't have to get legal representation involved in the custody in the visitation and things of that nature. This is something that they've been able to do and sustain, and they've been very successful with it. And I always applaud them for that. But with her dating this significant other for approximately 3 years now, and during this 3 year period, her significant other and the biological father of her children, they've never had any form of interaction during this particular period. And of course, the biological father, he has concerns over something. He has concerns over stories that he hear like I mentioned, his children are 5 years old and beneath. So their interpretation, their intellectualization, their articulation over what took place, could it be accurate? Perhaps. But we also have to consider that we're talking about children 5 years older, 5 years old and younger. He'll, of course, communicate with their biological mother. Her story differs from the children, so he's concerned about the actual accuracy and validity as far as the information he receives. But this ties into him never even meeting or communicating with her current significant other whatsoever. He shared with me that he has some resources, that he does have access to various resources, and he conducted a criminal background check on the person that the woman's dating, that the mother of his children are dating. There's some information on that background check that concerned him. He had mentioned this to me, and I shared with me, of course, I don't want to question the accuracy of that check, the manner in which your resource was able to obtain that information. But also I said, would you be comfortable with at least bringing this information to the other gentleman, to at least have him explain what happened? Is he in a position to fabricate what happened? The incident that he was concerned about, it did take place more than 10 years ago. So what I shared with him was, with that being such a significant period of time, is he in a position to be wholeheartedly truthful about what happened? Did he do it? Now we have to think about his level of decision making. Was there substance abuse involved? Not to make any excuses. Was there any form of chemical abuse involved? Was he going through anything psychiatrically that perhaps went undiagnosed? And of course, with it being undiagnosed, it was unmedicated. Could he have just been a different person? Because we are talking a very long time ago. We are talking 10 years ago. Could he have been a different person in which his level of decision making wasn't proportionate or identical with the level of decision making that he's involved with now? I wanted to use that as at least as a recommendation for him to use his concerns and say, okay, you know what, perhaps I should maybe not bring this up during our initial introduction, but just something to have in the back of my mind that these concerns are, particularly with him having time around his children. These are something that these are events that do concern me a little bit. The incidents had nothing to do with any form of child endangerment or any form of complications regarding his children being in danger, but what he had read as far as that particular background check, it did cause some concerns, despite that being 10 years ago. So with all of that information, he still never made the commitment to meet with this other gentleman. And as far as what I know today, he still has not had any form of communication. I will be meeting with these particular parties here in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully things change, but just going off history, working with these individuals, wonderful people, going off history, I would think that it would be safe to say that they had not met yet. When I meet with these parties here the next couple of weeks, and if I'm told that despite everything that's happened, that they still have not met, what do you feel as though should be offered to at least perhaps not change their minds wholeheartedly? Now, keep in mind, the biological mother and her significant other, the gentleman, they've been willing to do this for quite some time now. The standstill, so to speak, is the biological father. He is not in a position to agree to meet with his former significant other's current significant other. So with us meeting here in the next couple of weeks, what do you feel this? We're not all meeting together. I will just be meeting with this party during this particular time, that party, and that party, so on and so forth. What do you feel as though could be recommended for them to all finally come together so they can do what they can to be active in the lives of the children who are involved in the situation?
So it sounds like the holdup is the biological dad, and with him not wanting to meet her new significant other. Like, so honestly, in my opinion, I think that the mom should just kind of spring it on him. Just go be at the park and tell him, hey, let's take the kids to the park together and have her new significant other come. Because this is causing dilemmas with the kids because they're hearing situations and the situation is making them nervous. So they're probably also getting some kind of reverberation from dad on he feels some type of way about this guy because of the background check, but he's not ever taken the time to actually go meet the guy to see if what he feels from the background check is valid or not. So you can't play both sides of the fence. You can't say, well, I don't like this guy, I don't want him around my kids, or I'm concerned about him being around my kids, but never go meet him. Like, if he's willing to meet you and have a conversation with you, why are you not going to have this conversation? You can't, there is no justification for not having this conversation with this gentleman if he's willing to meet with you. And then you also have this information you said that you're concerned about. So you can't be too concerned about it if you're not going to meet this gentleman to get valid answers, to get valid truths. Kids are always going to have a different side of the story than the adult. So there's always going to be that whole situation where the truth lies in between the two stories. There's three parts. There's three parts to a story. There's the one person's side, the other person's side, and then the truth where they meet in the middle. So until he takes the time to go and meet with her significant other and for them to get to know each other, not like I said before, you don't have to be best friends, but you should have an understanding with each other to where, hey, there's something going on with the kids, or this situation just happened. Let me give him a call and tell them, hey, this happened. We got into a little bit of an argument. We didn't realize we got as loud as we did. So if the kids are upset, I do apologize, and have that conversation with each other as men, because not only are you putting your children in the middle, but you're putting their mother in the middle, which is causing problems with the children. And ultimately, in all of this stuff, if you put the kids before your own feelings and your own vendettas and your own other situations, everything will work out. Because if you put their well-being above what you want and what you think, it will be fine. Because for their well-being, it's for you to have a conversation with this gentleman and get to know each other a little bit better. That's in the best well-being for the kids. So I would recommend putting it in that aspect for them. Tell them, hey, don't you want your kids to have the best of everything? Don't you want them to be able to say, hey, dad, this happened at home, but you already know it happened. You're not hearing it from your kids because you had a conversation with him and you guys talked it out as men. Isn't that better than having your kids come to you freaked out and then you getting upset, which then upsets them?
You spoke of one thing that you offered. You shared that perhaps the woman should spring all of this on everyone. This was something that she did recommend as far as we had an individual counseling session, and she had shared with me about how I felt as though, what if she just took things into her own hands as far as having these parties meet with each other? The concern I had there was based off of me working with each of these parties, all three of the parties, and also the concerns about certain things that were discussed in confidence.
Mhm.
I asked her, I said, okay, that is an option, but is there a likelihood that, being realistic with ourselves, what's the likelihood that both of these gentlemen are going to come together, shake hands, hug, and say nice to meet you and things of that nature? Will that happen? Or will there be instantaneous hostility between with at least one of the parties? So just now we're talking about testosterone being there. We're talking about hostility. Now could one party become defensive, which could trigger the other party to become defensive. And rather than this, what was supposed to be an introduction, to also move towards doing what's perhaps best for the children involved, now we're potentially having some sort of verbal altercation that could perhaps transition into a physical altercation. And the reason why I share this, that is definitely a great recommendation, but with this particular party, that could be something that that perhaps could be counterproductive. There were times in which their paths almost, and I'm talking accidentally, their paths almost did cross. She does a great job with making certain that when one is coming, the other is gone. The reason being is she expressed to me that she does have concerns about if they were to meet and one, particularly the biological father of her children, she had shared with me that if he didn't agree to something and things were sprung onto him, that he could react in an aggressive manner. And that could cause the other person to become aggressive as well. And then she's concerned about what could happen because she said there is a likelihood that a physical altercation could take place and then someone could get hurt. So under those circumstances, we're talking about this was something that she mentioned, and you offered that as well as far as this has been going on for approximately 3 years now. They still have not met. They still have not communicated whatsoever with each other. So they have no idea who the other is outside of stories and perspectives being told by others. So in this case, we're now talking about a possible physical altercation taking place. Could that be worst case scenario? Perhaps. But now we're at least the realization is that one party, and in this case, we're talking about the biological father, he perhaps may not be wholeheartedly excited about this surprise being sprung onto him. There are concerns about how he can handle himself under those circumstances. So with that being something that is a reality, when I mentioned this to her, I said based off of the interaction and the hours I've spent with him, and based off what you said, is this something that could happen? And she processed a little bit and said, you know what, that actually there is a significant chance that there could be some form of at least passive aggressiveness. And that could potentially cause the gentleman that she's currently dating to react in a certain way. And with this all this spiraling downhill, so to speak, it could ultimately manifest itself in a physical altercation. So with that at least being somewhat of a likelihood, what could we offer her with this now again going on 3 years and the gentleman that she's currently dating and the biological father of her children still not having any form of communication with each other? What can we offer her outside of springing the surprise on either party?
Well, then the other thing you can do is maybe talk to his family, the biological dad's family, and see if they're willing to help her mend this bridge, this gap that's going on between the two of them. The other option is like when it comes to this type of thing, I think it's always best for parents to work things out between themselves and not involve the courts or the legal system in any way. But maybe she could reach out to an attorney for a mediator, like, and have a situation like that to where not necessarily subpoenaed, but you receive something saying, hey, you need to be at this mediation between these two parties on this day. So that way he can't avoid it. Like that's what it is. It seems like the biological dad is avoiding anything and everything to deal with this situation that he can in any which way. It's like he wants to be mad about it instead of accepting it and moving forward in the best way. It's like he wants to hold on to this grudge or madness or something that he has going on internally. But I don't know if she has a good relationship with his family, if he has a good relationship with his family. But I think if she has a good relationship with his family, or even just a passing one, but he has a good, strong relationship with his family, if she could sit down and talk to his mom or his dad, or someone in his cousin that he's really close to, or his brother or sister that he's really close to, and have this conversation with them and explain to them the situation, everything that's been going on. Like, this has been 3 years. I've been trying to get him to meet him. He's just being adamant about it and refusing. And, it's starting to hinder and hurt the kids in other ways, not necessarily physically, but emotionally and mentally. And, it's getting to be too much. Do you think you could talk to him and have him sit down, or come with him to sit down and have a conversation with us? If anything, I would recommend going to his family first and seeing if there's a way for them to help her with this situation. But ultimately, if that doesn't work, I would say get a mediator involved to make it to where he has to come to a meeting. Like, yeah, he's not going to be happy about it. He's going to be mad, but he should not flip out because he's going to be in a different type of setting, and it's going to be in a not per se completely legal setting, but it's going to be in a legal setting to where if his attitude goes the wrong direction, it could be detrimental to him. So I would assume that he can control himself long enough for in that situation long enough to just get the hello, how are you? We've been together 3 years. I just want you to know me a little bit out of the way.
I like those recommendations. I feel as though whenever we have these particular issues with just remaining along the path of step parents, or at least someone who's currently dating a biological parent, so we're introducing these adults into the lives of children who are involved. I like those particular recommendations just to help someone get those rationalizations, those justifications, or their shall I say, those excuses. They're now out of the ways. We're removing those barriers to help someone become present and become active. And this is something that could be potentially be used to help someone maintain that momentum, so to speak.
Yeah.
Remaining along the path of being present and being active. One thing, just working as a board certified family recovery specialist, one thing in particular that I've heard or I've had tossed my way is someone would share with me that the current interests, whether that be educational or academic, whether that be something recreational, I would be told that with the parent spending so much time away from their children have developed or evolved into into this particular child. They're interested in this particular activity, in that activity, and the parent would share with me that they don't have anything in common with their child, and they could potentially use that as a form of either intimidation or some form of rationalization, or perhaps even an excuse. So we have a parent here presenting in front of us. They share that they want to be involved, and under those circumstances, all I could do is be supportive, be encouraging, and hope the information that I'm having tossed my way is factual. So you want to be involved, but everything your child has going on, you're not interested in. So what I want to use the hypothetical scenario. We have a child, we have a young child, a male. He's falling in love with baseball. His entire life is centered around baseball, whether that be training, whether that be watching baseball broadcasting, whether that be watching documentaries or docuseries that focuses on baseball, whether that be practices, games. But we have this biological parent. They've been absent for whatever reason, whether that be incarceration, whether that be rehabilitation, or perhaps even some other circumstance that position this parent to be away from his or her child for an extensive period of time. The parent wants to come around, but the child is predominantly focused on baseball. It could sound easy as a professional or as parents ourselves. We're very supportive of our children. Whatever it is they want to do, we do the best that we can to make certain that they're in a position to experience what they want to experience, whatever their interests are. So let's use that parent. That parent claims to want to get back involved into the lives of their children, but their children have these interests that are not of they're not positioning the parent to be enthusiastic. So rather than the parent using that as a barrier, what could we offer that parent? And we're talking about a parent who've been gone for whatever reason. They came back. They're in their position to come back, but now their child is in love with baseball. But this isn't something that the parent wants to have any involvement with. But this is what the child wants to do. What can we offer that parent as far as becoming engaged in the interests of your child or children, whatever they are? What can we offer that parent? Because we also have to understand that the parent, of course, it's easy to say the parent should just transition into whatever the child wants to do. But with this particular platform, I want to present these type of scenarios, and I want to have people engaged in dialogue in the comment sections. I want people to realize that parents are human beings too. They have their own thoughts, they have their own feelings, they have their own emotions, their perspectives. So it may not be as easy for one parent to just dive into whatever their child or children is doing compared to someone else. This could essentially be a very instrumental barrier that could cause them to not become the best version of a parent that they can be. So, what can we offer that parent who came back into the lives of their child or children and came to the realization that their children are involved with various interests that they just cannot find it within their heart, within themselves to get active with. And now that same barrier is in the way. They have this issue that's in front of them. They want to be the best parent that they can be, but the interests of their child is just not something that they can find themselves to get excited about. What can we offer that particular parent under those circumstances?
I would say under those circumstances to maybe sit down with your child and have a discussion because they usually have another interest that they like. It's not going to be a wholeheartedly 100% one thing. Maybe you guys can, after say let's just stick with baseball. Say after his baseball game, go to his baseball game, but after his baseball game, you guys say, okay, well, let's go do this activity, maybe like an activity that's obviously age appropriate for your child, but that you also like doing. So share your interests with him or her as well, so that maybe so now you guys are sharing things. You're sharing interests with each other. So I would still recommend, even though you don't like the sport that they're playing or the activity that they're in, I would still recommend going and maybe, like, for instance, like with baseball again, maybe videotape his game or her game for her so that way she can watch that later on and go through different things that they need to work on in their game. But after the game, you guys go and do something that you like or something that you both like to do together. If you guys sit down and talk and you guys are like, okay, well, he loves baseball, and you tell him, when I was your age, I used to do this. And he'd be like, oh, that sounds like fun. So after the game, you guys can go do that. And then that's an activity that you guys can do together and a bonding experience for the two of you. So I wholeheartedly get the not liking or being interested in the activity that your kid is in. Because when our daughter did gymnastics, that still was not my thing. I was ready to go after we got right into the gym. But if you give them time and you show them that you're interested in what they like, they'll show interest in something that you like if you guys talk about it. So maybe you guys, after the baseball game, you guys go watch a movie together, or you go putt golf, or you go go-kart racing, something like that. Like, so just share, basically, in a way, just like how you do as kids, how you share your toys and you share activities with your siblings or with your friends. I recommend doing that because, like I said, it's showing them that you're still interested in, you may not necessarily be interested in what they like, but you're willing to be there for it. So then they're going to be willing to go to something that you like to do. And then they may actually like that too.
When it comes to things along those lines, I definitely like to at least consider self-confidence. And we're talking about a parent who's wanting to be present and wanting to be active as far as what their child or children is involved with. But they could perhaps feel as though that this isn't something they're knowledgeable of. This isn't something that they're competent with or of. I like to offer the recommendations to parents. If your child is doing something that you may not consider yourself to be a proverbial subject matter expert, if you're able to do so psychologically, and that's why I wanted to share that. I still want people to understand that the parent,
Yeah.
we're still human too. We still have our own perspectives and our own emotions and experiences and viewpoints of society, of matters from a cultural perspective and what's taking place sociologically. I at least want the parent. Now, that's why I wanted to offer that caveat. If you're able to do so emotionally, at least do the best that you can to become more knowledgeable. That can make you more knowledgeable of what your child or children is involved in. That can make you a little more confident in what's taking place. And that level of confidence could be something that you could utilize as far as leaning upon, as far as getting into your child or children's lives and remaining involved in their lives, and just using that activity, whether that be baseball, whether that be preparation for some sort of spelling competition, just getting involved with that, just even learning some words, just reading a dictionary for a few minutes if you're able to do so. Just learning a couple of words here and there. I'm just using that scenario as far as a spelling competition because whether a child is going to public school, some sort of private school, parochial school, spelling competitions is something that could eventually present itself. And as a parent, this may not be something that you've done during your childhood. It may not be something that you've ever thought about doing, but just reading a dictionary or just getting onto the internet and just learning a couple of words and using that, teaching your child that word. Is that word a noun? Is it a verb? Could it be used? Could it be either or, depending upon the manner in which it's utilized? Just putting your child in a position to learn as well while you're learning. This could be something that could be utilized so you can all grow together, and it could be leaned upon as far as strengthening your relationship. I did want to dive into self-confidence as far as parenting being used to become present and active into a child's life. We are approaching that time in which we're going to close down this episode. I do sincerely hope that the information and the topics, subtopics that were covered during the episode of this podcast is something that could help someone ultimately become positioned to be the best version of a parent that they could become. This is why I wanted you and I to create the Dr. and Mrs. Curry parenting related improvement platform to help parents become the best versions of themselves. If this is a video, if this is a video that you felt as though was informational, consider subscribing to our channel. Like the video if it is a video that you did like. Share the video and check out some of our other videos that we have on our channel. We do have a website for our company. That website is www.drcurryandassociates.com, and that is to our organization. We do have an array of multi-systemic programming that we do have that we've gotten off the ground, and the name of that company is Dr. Curry and Associates. We do have intentions on keeping this parenting related matters podcast moving forward. My better half and I, we do have an assortment of subjects that we would like to cover. We're very proud, very loving parents ourselves. We do have an understanding that matters do present themselves. Circumstances do present themselves that could cause someone to not be in the life or lives of their child or children. And that is why Mrs. Curry and I wanted to create this particular platform to ultimately help someone become the best version of a parent of themselves that they could possibly be. One reason, there's many reasons behind why we wanted to do this, but one particular reason is our children, they do have unlimited potential. And I always tell people, whether that be during individual counseling session, group, or family, I would ask them, I said, do you feel as though your child or children realistically can accomplish something historically? Could they impact matters cross culturally? The answer is yes. It can happen. It is realistic. And what I would dive into, will their chances be somewhat heightened just by having that loving, unconditional support and encouragement by their biological parents, if their biological parents are capable of doing so, despite the other loved ones that are in their lives? Could matters be just a little bit improved, be a little bit heightened if their biological parents are around and supportive and present and active? I believe, at least from my professional experiences, that the answer to that question is yes. With the absence of a biological parent, and I'm not talking about anyone passing away, I'm talking about we do have substantiation that the biological parent or parents, they are alive, they are well, they're just not present. I do believe that presents a level of psychological, of emotional anguish or challenges that could be left unresolved. And that is why I wanted to create the Dr. and Mrs. Curry parenting related podcast platform so we can just utilize this just as parents ourselves to ultimately help someone become the best version of a parent that they can be. I would like to thank you all for being part of this particular podcast. I hope with the missus and I that we shared with you during this hour or so during our time together, that this is something that either you or someone you know could lean upon to ultimately, like I mentioned, help you become positioned to be the best version of a parent that you can be. We'll catch you next time, and thanks again for being part of this podcast.